Y'all, thanks for coming out. It is truly a beautiful day here in Washington, D.C., but right now on our southern border, it is total chaos that's happening right now. It is May the 11th, the day the president has declared the end of the pandemic, but this day is also the end of Title 42. So let me just set the stage. If we go back a decade ago, at that time, Secretary of DHS Jay Johnson announced if we have 1,000 people that cross the border in a day, it's a very bad day for us if we have 1,000. Fast forward to the earliest days of the Biden administration, and they stopped doing border wall construction. They announced a change in Title 42 policy to turn it down. At some point there, announced a shift in how they're handling family policies, and they suddenly had 4,500 to 5,000 people a day. Yesterday, there were 10,000 people a day that illegally crossed our border. This bad situation where we've got 2.5 million people crossing our border now and abusing our immigration system and our visa system has now accelerated to a pace literally we have never seen. If you're a Border Patrol agent right now along our southern border, you literally don't know what the policy is. The old policy goes away at midnight tonight with Title 42. A new policy has been put in place today that has not been tested. And at the same time, the administration is stepping up and saying, we're very aware that we may have bad days to weeks to months coming ahead. The reason for that is because of the end of Title 42, because they had not put a new border policy in place in time to be able to make a difference. We have over 600,000 people just south of our southern border in shelters awaiting to be able to cross in the days ahead. 600,000 people. So what has happened is the administration has sent 1,500 military individuals to be able to go down to our border, not to be able to enforce the border, but to be able to handle transportation and processing people into the country. This is a chaotic situation that Americans do not like. Americans like legal immigration. They do not like illegal immigration, and they certainly don't like what's happening right now on our southern border, where they're doing what they call street releases. Street releases are just what you would think they are. These are individuals that come in, literally fingerprint them, get a name and information. They send them into the country and ask them to turn themselves in to an ICE agent in any location that they want to be able to pick. So they literally tell the agents on the border which city they want to go to. They say, when you get there, go to this community and turn yourself in. Then they can then get in line for a hearing dealing with asylum. In many places across the country, that line is now 10 years long. Street releases also mean these individuals are in these small communities and they literally have nowhere to go, no transportation, no direction, and it's overwhelming the small communities. The chaos on our southern border continues to accelerate. This administration has not done what it needed to do. This was a very predictable crisis. And may I remind everyone, there was conversation about the end of Title 42 in the very first weeks of the Biden administration's term. We're now 2.5 years in, and they're showing they were not prepared for this moment. We have got to enforce our border and to be able to manage these crises in a way that just honors the law and honors the American people. This whole group of folks all is passionate about this. Most every one of them been down the border multiple times to be able to engage. They want to be able to also share what is happening in their particular states and what they're doing practically to be able to make this situation better.
Thank you, Senator Lankford. And I want to thank the colleagues that we have here today as well to talk about the border crisis and what the end of Title 42 means to their particular communities. And just as Senator Lankford said, every single day now we will see 10,000 immigrants illegally crossing our border. This is already happening. I think of my home community of Red Oak, Iowa. 10,000 immigrants every single day. That's twice the number of people that live in my community, Red Oak, Iowa, coming across the border every single day. Now, Iowa is over 1,000 miles away from our southern border. I get that. But it is impacting Iowa. It is impacting our communities. And what we have seen, when you think of the southern border, you think of the illicit activity that happens there. Number one that comes to mind, of course, is the fentanyl crisis that we have. And in Iowa, what we have experienced because of this border crisis is a spike in fentanyl overdose deaths from Iowans under 25%, a spike up to 120%. These are Iowans who are losing their lives because of this border crisis and an uncontrolled border. Biden has failed our American people, utterly failed, and put us at the mercy of these drug cartels that literally control our southern border. But folks, I just am here to say, In spite of what's going on at the border, Republicans do actually have solutions that Democrats and President Biden have turned a blind eye to and a deaf ear. My Build It Act would put already purchased materials, federal government has purchased them, would put them to work by allowing our states to obtain those and continue building the border wall. And for the safety and security of our nation, we must, number one, secure the border. That comes first and foremost. Second is reinstate the Remain in Mexico policy that was put into place under the Trump administration. And then finally, end this reckless catch and release program. Again, you know, Iowa is not considered a border state, but all states are now becoming a border state. Thanks, Senator Lankford, and thanks to the team here.
Number one, Joe Biden doesn't give a damn about Americans. And why would I say that? 70,000 Americans died of fentanyl overdose. Why? Joe Biden doesn't care. He has a completely open border. We've got criminals. We've got terrorists coming into our country. Just last week, a family was murdered by an illegal immigrant into this country. And have you seen anything that Joe Biden's done to secure the border? I just went to Del Rio, Texas last week. It's the third time I've been to the border since Biden got elected. Here's how it works. We did an aerial tour. There's people just walking across, coming across the Rio Grande. They're just walking across and coming in. Border Patrol has no right to do anything other than pick them up, take them to a processing center, and release them. And then when they're released, with your tax dollars, they're flown all over this country. They're flown all over Florida. All right, so what do we have in Florida? We have crime, we have fentanyl, right? We have terrorists, and we have Chinese spies coming across. It's not that hard to secure the border. I mean, it was secure when Trump left office. What should we do? Do exactly what other Republicans have said. Finish the construction of the wall. Put up the technology. Support our Border Patrol agents. If we need more Border Patrol agents, get them out there. Enforce the existing asylum laws in this country. But the bottom line is, for whatever reason, I don't think anybody can understand why Joe Biden's doing this. Joe Biden has decided he wants an open border where anybody can come across the border and you're just flown anywhere you want in this country. This is despicable what he's doing to American citizens. We are losing people daily to fentanyl, to crime. This is wrong.
Well, good morning, everybody. The open southern border is the #1 national security threat that this nation faces. And like Senator Ernst, I think of my hometown of Great Bend. There's 11,000 people that were apprehended crossing the border Tuesday, again, the size of my hometown. There's 170,000 people waiting to come across the border. That would be the third largest city in Kansas. That's enough people that would fill Chief Stadium, Royal Stadium, Kansas State Football Stadium, and Kansas University's football stadium. Think about the impact that that's going to have on America as well as all of our nation. The questions my dad, the police officer, asked me is, how many terrorists are in this group? How many convicted criminals are coming back across the border, snuck in among 170,000 other people? And how much fentanyl is crossing the border? Again, a Kansan dying every day from fentanyl poisoning, 300 Americans dying every day from fentanyl poisoning. Look, this has become a humanitarian crisis as well as a war zone, and that's why I'm leading a group of senators there tonight. I'm proud to have Senator Hoeven, Senator Budd, and Senator Cruz joining me as we go to see firsthand what's going to happen as Title 42 ends. Certainly Joe Biden owns this problem, but as a senator, I feel it's my obligation to go down there and give our Border Patrol officers a word of encouragement. They've worked overtime, they're working 6 or 7 days a week, 12-hour shifts, they're exhausted. So I simply want to give them a word of encouragement, just like we would go to an active war zone overseas. And then I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to the 1,500 soldiers that are leaving their families to go to the southern border. And I want to say thank you to the 10,000 guardsmen that the governor from Texas is sending as well. I want to see firsthand, just in case the national media doesn't cover this issue, that they don't make this a priority to show Americans, again, this is the #1 national security threat this nation faces, a humanitarian crisis created by Joe Biden. Thank you.
We have a border crisis, we have a fentanyl crisis, and we have a humanitarian crisis, and that includes the people who are being victimized by the drug cartels coming across the border. If the Biden administration had tried to make this a crisis, they couldn't have done a better job than they've done. Just look at what the people around the world have been told about immigration in the United States. During the campaign, candidate Joe Biden sent every signal that our border was going to be open. During the transition period and during the first days of his administration, he sent a clear signal, and whether he meant to or not, that signal went around the world and has caused this crisis. I do want to say this and echo what Joni Ernst was talking about. We have sections of the wall that are built and ready to be put in place. The Build It Act, which she and I have endorsed, would require the government to take this border protection and put it in place. Right now, if you can believe this, our government...
In the name of Jesus. Jesus.
Amen.
In the mighty name of Jesus. Do you know Jesus?
Yes, I do. And in the United States government, as I was about to point out, pays private landowners rent to store these already completed sections of the border wall. We are spending millions and millions of dollars each year to pay people not to put up the border wall. And so I hope the Congress will look at this legislation, but basically the administration has made this bed. They are lying in it now. And as Senator Marshall said, it's up to us to step forward and correct this problem.
If this makes no sense to you, it's so intense that you don't know what you're going to do. If this ain't for you, this ain't for you.
We're going to pause for just a minute.
Do you think you tripping when you get hit with the...
Ladies and gentlemen, John Hoven.
Well, thanks to all of you for being here. It really is a beautiful day to be outside and to have a chance to talk to all of you about this incredibly important issue. I want to thank Senator Lankford for pulling us together to again focus the nation's attention on the crisis at the border. I also want to thank Senator Marshall for organizing a trip. A number of us are going down there again to make sure that we continue to call attention to this crisis and to do everything we can to force the Biden administration to enforce the law. This is about enforcing the law. Border security is national security. And he can do it, but he won't. He won't implement the policy that is required to enforce the border. Our Customs and Border Protection professionals, our Border Patrol professionals, they can manage the border. They can secure the border, but only if they're given the right tools. Look, by returning to the Remain in Mexico Protocol and the Third Safe Country Protocol, which we had under the prior administration, CBP and Border Patrol can and will secure the border. But the Biden administration won't do it. So they can continue to talk, they can continue to obfuscate. Alexandra Mayorkas can continue to obfuscate, but the reality is this. If the Biden administration puts those two policies in place, Remain in Mexico and third safe country protocol, the professionals on the border, CBP and Border Patrol, will secure the border right now, not sometime in the future, now. They showed they can do it under the prior administration. Again, this comes back to the Biden administration refusing to enforce the law, and everybody in America needs to know it. So when 2.5 million people come to this country illegally last year, more this year, and more after the health protocol, Title 42, ends this, at midnight tonight, there'll be more coming. 2.5 million last year, already on pace for more this year. That will only increase with the end of Title 42. So every community across this country, when they have people, in their community, on the street, no food, no shelter, overwhelmed, and it's happening, as my colleagues have said, in every state in the country. When you see those people there, when you see the drugs, when you see the fentanyl, when you see the human trafficking, understand that it is simply because the Biden administration refuses to enforce the law. Americans elected him to enforce the law. He's not doing it. And so when he gets up there, or somebody in his administration gets up there and says, well, gee, we can't do it for this reason, or we can't do it for that reason, it's not the case. If they implement the third safe country protocol, the Remain in Mexico protocol, the professionals down there will secure the border. We're not guessing on this, guys. It's already been done. We did it under the last administration. So this isn't theoretical. That's the cold, hard reality, and every American needs to know it. And every American needs to demand that the Biden administration enforce the law.
Thank you, Senator Lankford, for getting us together to address this crisis. Look, in order to be a strong nation, we have to have strong borders, and right now, we don't have that. We're in the middle of the worst border crisis in our nation's history, and since President Biden took office, there have been more than 5 million illegal crossings. In addition to that, I mean, that's the most in U.S. history, but in addition to that, 1.4 million known gotaways. In addition to that, all of the unaccounted for unknown gotaways, including terrorists, human traffickers, and other bad actors that are taking advantage of our open southern border. Now, I've been there multiple times, and I'm going to be traveling there again today, so thank you to Senator Marshall and my other colleagues that will be going down there to visit with our Border Patrol and law enforcement. And they told me, in the times that I've been there before, that yes, we need a wall, we need border enforcement, we need funding, but what we really need, in their words, is an administration that has their back, and right now, they don't have that. I talked with sheriffs from all over North Carolina's 100 counties, and many of them came up to me saying the same thing. Every single county in North Carolina is now a border county because of Joe Biden's policies. We've simply got a president that has retreated from his responsibility to defend and to protect this country. And bottom line, this is a dereliction of duty. Securing the border, it used to be a bipartisan issue. Now, all of us here, we've got solutions in addition to, and that go beyond Title 42, which is ending at midnight. So I want to call on President Biden to change course, to open a dialogue so that we can solve this crisis together. We know what to do, and we know that in order to be a strong nation, we have to have strong borders.
Senator Lankford, thank you for organizing this today. I appreciate it very much. And I want to welcome all of you to the next chapter in the horror story that is Joe Biden's America. Joe Biden has decided that it's best to cede control completely of our southern border to cartels, multi-billion-dollar criminal organizations that work in partnership with the Chinese Communist Party to flood fentanyl into our country, to kill our youth. In fact, the #1 killer of young Americans today between 18 and 45 years of age is overdose. Most of it fentanyl coming across that southern border. This is the next chapter in Joe Biden's America. The national security crisis that he has created here in America is, as my colleagues have said, like nothing we've ever seen before, but it goes beyond our borders. I met with the president of Guatemala. He told me that he would like to tell me what the root cause of the problem is in his country. He said he's lost all control of his southern border because there are now caravans of people moving through his country. He has no idea who they are. He's lost control of his sovereignty as a nation because of what Joe Biden has done to invite people from all over the world to illegally enter our country. Joe Biden is destabilizing the entirety of Latin America as a result of the policies that he's adopted. It's leading to deaths in my home state of Tennessee. It's turning every town into a border town. And this chapter is going to turn out to be the worst chapter in America's history if we allow it to continue. Republicans have solutions, but Democrats continue to block it. Yesterday, for the 4th time, I brought my legislation to the floor of the United States Senate to stop fentanyl border crossings, to modify Title 42, to make it permanent. And when drug smuggling is suspected, as it constantly is happening, our border agents would have the ability to turn people back. Democrats blocked it yet again last night. So we're about to witness another tragedy here in America, again, courtesy of President Joe Biden. Thank you.
President Biden's mismanagement at the border, he's created a preventable catastrophe. There's no question about that. You know, how do I know that? Well, I've been to the border. I haven't been to the sanitized show that our president and vice president's staff set up for them to see when they went to the border. We went to the border. We went to the detention, the processing centers. We went to a stash house. We talked with Border Patrol. We saw the border, what was really happening at the border. What we're hearing from this administration, the claims that there's no crisis, that the border is safe, that's false. You all know that. It's false. We have an administration now, they can't even say the words illegal immigration. It's been reworked into irregular migration. That's what we hear from the Department of Homeland Security. That's what we hear from the Department of Justice. Irregular migration. I don't understand why the administration can't be honest with the American people. They've had over 2 years to be honest with the American people. This is illegal immigration, and it's going to get worse. This is chaos at the border, and it is going to get worse. And we have an administration that doesn't even have the backbone to stand up and tell the American people what is headed our way after midnight tonight. We've seen a record 5 million people, 5 million illegal crossings at the southern border under President Biden. There have been another 1.4 million known gotaways under President Biden. We have 85,000 unaccompanied children. They crossed the border and now they're missing. That is a crisis. That is chaos. That is not irregular migration. We need to step up, secure our border. It was secure when this president came into office, and now we have total chaos. That is a humanitarian crisis, that is a fentanyl crisis, and it is a national security crisis.
I want to thank Senator Lankford for hosting this press conference. I'm going to build on Deb Fischer's comments. The biggest falsehood being peddled in Washington, D.C. right now into the American people is that our border is secure. Day after day, we hear senior Biden administration officials repeating that the border is secure. Over the past few years, there have been a lot of our Democratic colleagues referencing and talking about the, quote, big lie. The big lie of 2023 is that the border is secure. The president knows it. Secretary Mayorkas knows it. I think you guys in the media know it. Certainly our Border Patrol agents know it, and most importantly, the American people know it. You've heard a lot of numbers and statistics today at this press conference. One that Senator Hagerty just mentioned, largely driven by the fentanyl crisis because of our open southern border. Overdoses are now the leading cause of death for Americans aged 18 to 45. In 2021, drug overdose deaths in Alaska increased by the largest percentage of any other state, demonstrating that even the Americans that I have the privilege of representing, thousands of miles from Biden's open borders, are still paying a dear price for this fiasco. The border is not secure, and everybody knows it, including the cartels. Today, Biden's open border will move from crisis to catastrophe, and tens of thousands of law-abiding American citizens from border states to the great state of Alaska will continue to pay dearly for this president's remarkable dereliction of duty when it comes to securing our border.
It's been said before, but it needs to be repeated. President Biden's handling of the humanitarian and security crisis at our southern border has turned that crisis into a catastrophe. The leading cause of death among Americans aged 18 to 45 is fentanyl. Over 70,000 people in 2021 died of fentanyl. Over 100,000 of drug overdose. Fentanyl precursors are produced in China, shipped to Mexico, turned into fentanyl in illegal cartel labs, and then shipped here. In my home state of Nebraska, in 2019, law enforcement confiscated 46 fentanyl pills. Just 3 years later, that number was over 151,000. And one of those pills took the life of Taryn Lee Griffith, a single mom of two in Lincoln, Nebraska. President Biden could use this health crisis of fentanyl poisonings to implement Title 42. He could do that today. Declare a health emergency around Title 42 because what is happening of drug overdoses in our country, and he is not doing it. I am calling on the president, declare that health emergency. Continue Title 42. Because of what is happening in our country. We heard the other statistics. Over 5 million people crossing the border, 85,000 kids disappearing. This catastrophe at the southern border could have been avoided. The policies were in place. We know what we need to do. Among those things is the infrastructure like the wall. Better technology for our Customs and Border Patrol, and more personnel. These are the things that they have told me when I've been down at the southern border the 3 times I've been down there. President Biden's job is to keep Americans safe, and he is not doing that. We need him to take action to secure our border. And the problem is getting worse. And that's why my Republican colleagues and I are here today to call on the president to take action to keep the American people safe. Thank you.
I want to start by thanking Senator Lankford. Thank you for putting this together and for your continued leadership on this important issue. I also want to thank Senator Blackburn, Senator Ernst, and Senator Cornyn for giving me the opportunity to see this tragedy firsthand. So I went to the border 3 times so far in my tenure in the United States Senate. I want to put that in perspective for you. So I went 3 times in 2 months, whereas Joe Biden has only been 3 hours in 2 years. And when we went, we asked for the real, unvarnished truth. And what I'm here to tell you is that we have a humanitarian and a national security crisis at our border every single day. As a mom, it was gut-wrenching to watch women pregnant attempt to cross the border with multiple tiny children behind them. To look into the eyes of our CBP agents who said, look, I pulled a woman from this very river last week who was pregnant with twins. She drowned. As a mom, to sit across from a young woman who told me it wasn't that she was raped every day, it was how many times a day she was raped at the hands of the drug cartels. As I've traveled the great state of Alabama, sitting across from a parent who told me he lost his son to fentanyl poisoning. When in the world is this administration going to wake up? We must seal and secure our border, put back in policies that just make sense and that keep Americans safe and our communities strong. Listen, what we are about to see happen over the next few days is going to be catastrophic, but it is nothing that we didn't know was coming. On January 26th, Joe Biden came out and said, we are ending the public health emergency and Title 42 on May 11th. Now, I want you to pay close attention to this timeline, because then on March 9th, he came out with his budget that cut the Department of Homeland Security by 1%. Now, let me tell you something. President Biden wasn't afraid of increasing things when he thought they needed to be, because he increased EPA by 19%. That decrease made it even more challenging to secure our border, to combat fentanyl, and to make sure that we put these traffickers in their place and enforce our existing immigration laws. There is no doubt that it is open season for human traffickers, drug cartels, and terrorists. I plead with the administration, the men and women behind me and in this building, we have real solutions. Come to the table. Let's secure our border. Let's put the American people first. Let's put the safety of our children and communities all across this country before anything else. Thank you.
So just about every day now, I get text messages from folks back home just asking the same thing. When is the border going to be secured? What is it going to take? And just day after day, they hear stories of drug overdoses, of crime. They see on the news the different stories, and they think, what is the problem? When is this going to get better? That's just the simple question we're asking the administration. What is the problem? Why won't you do the task that you know you need to do? When is this going to actually get resolved? Let me open this up for questions. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Senator. Excuse me. Jefferson Richmond with the Apple Times. Should the GOP use immigration as leverage in the debt ceiling talks? In other words, not agree to the debt ceiling being raised unless there are measures to protect the border? And then my second question is, what was your reaction to Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib having an anti-Israel event on the Senate side, courtesy of Senator Sanders?
So I would say every American has the right to free speech, including in this place, and we've seen it today as well. But I'm going to be loud and clear that we have an ally that's Israel, and we're going to stand by our ally Israel. As far as what needs to be in the debt ceiling negotiations, Speaker McCarthy and the president are finally sitting down. It took the president 98 days to be able to even sit down and discuss the debt ceiling issues. So at this point, they're finally sitting down to be able to talk, and I'll allow the speaker to be able to have the negotiation. By the way, which is the exact same situation that happened under President Trump when it was Speaker Pelosi sitting down with President Trump having to be able to negotiate the issues. So nothing radical about this, but I'll let Speaker McCarthy actually drive what needs to be in that piece. But we do need to solve the immigration, and today the House of Representatives is actually voting on an immigration package. Yes, sir.
The House has a border bill they're voting on today, more than likely. Have y'all read it? Are y'all supportive of it?
So I've looked over the proposals of their package. Obviously, they've got to finish up, see if they have other amendments and things on it, but the House is acting on this, as they have on energy policy and permitting, as they have on the debt ceiling. The Senate so far has not taken up any of those. Senator Schumer has been unwilling to be able to take up, even to debate those. It is our hope and our prayer and our intention to be able to force the issue on this. We all see the problem at the border. We've got to be able to have a solution. Now, the Senate and the House don't always agree on everything. I don't know if you've noticed. We do have disagreements at times. But we've got to be able to get together to be able to resolve this. Some of the basic parameters of their bill dealing with how to be able to deal with the asylum loopholes that are there, finish building the border fencing. Some of those are pretty basic things that are just not controversial. Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
last year. But with Title 42 ending, is there like a narrow piece of legislation that you think senators could come around relatively soon to address the influx that's going to be coming in with that?
Our hope is to try to move on something as quickly as we possibly can to be able to get something resolved. Anyone who has eyes can see the problem now on the border. And there are lots of issues on immigration, and every time we talk about immigration, everybody wants to pile on one more issue, one more thing, but we do need to deal with securing the border. And, well, I would say I always support my own bills, so those are the best. Those are 100% accurate every time on my own. But what we're seeing now is working through committees, multiple members that have been here today are bringing up different ideas. I think the Senate will pull together multiple good ideas from different bills and to be able to combine a bill. It can't be so big that it doesn't get done because it's obvious this is a major problem. The administration, by the way, does have the tools to enforce the asylum policies. They have those tools right now. They've always had those tools. They've just chosen not to be able to use them. So, yes, ma'am.
Can you just address the broader issue, though? Is there any momentum at all for comprehensive immigration reform? Can you poll the Democrats who are concerned about the border? And a number have been, like, vocally concerned about Title 42 ending. And then I just have a separate question about the death ceiling.
So I would say I hope that we can get an immigration bill. If you start talking about comprehensive, that ends up being a 3,000-page bill with lots of issues that gets weighted down in committees as we're going through the minutia of it. Securing the border has not been a controversial issue in the past. It's clearly a problem that everybody can see. If you go back in the past, we were voting in a bipartisan manner in the Senate and in the House to be able to add border fencing. Now suddenly border fencing is controversial. Again, some of these issues are just not controversial to be able to resolve. The asylum issue is the big loophole that does have to be closed, and we've got to be able to resolve that issue. So whether we can do a comprehensive bill that weighs down and then falls on its own weight, I doubt it. But whether we can deal with a smaller, more tailored bill that may have multiple topics but deal with the key issues there, I think it's possible. And I'm going to keep working as if it is. What would you follow up on that?
And on the debt ceiling, just ask you, President Trump last night is urging Republicans to, quote, do a default if you don't get the massive cuts that you want, saying you might as well do it now, you're going to have to do it later. Just wonder if you agree with those things.
So I think we do need to be responsible to the way we handle the debt. We've had a debt limit vote that's happened decade after decade. Both parties have come to the table to be able to negotiate this. Both parties have actually approached it, but we do need to have negotiation. Speaker Pelosi held up the House and said she would not approve a debt limit until President Trump had increased spending. And I think President Trump is saying it's now the Republicans' turn to be able to say we're going to decrease spending on this. President Biden has tried to increase spending $2 trillion. $2 trillion. And it's not unreasonable to be able to say, let's slow down the rate of spending. And so I'm going to let Speaker McCarthy actually be the lead negotiator on this, but we need to be able to do the right thing, keep a stable market, and continue to show that the Americans are the adults in the world stage. Yeah. Yes, sir.
You touched on the asylum issue. How should security be balanced with the humanitarian and asylum issue here, especially when you have potential legitimate asylum claims coming to the border? And then you have countries like Venezuela saying, we're not going to accept deportation flights.
So when you deal with a Venezuelan that's coming through, they've already come through about 7 countries before they ever got here. The rule in most countries in Europe, certainly the law that's in Canada, if you arrive in Canada and you're from Venezuela, the first question that they're going to ask you is, did you request asylum in the countries you traveled through? If they say no, they're going to turn them right back around. That's in most countries in Europe, the same thing. The typical thing on asylum worldwide has been you go plead asylum in a country that's nearby. Well, last time I was in Yuma, Arizona was in January. When I was in Yuma, I looked on the board on how many countries were coming through that month, and I was fascinated to be able to see there are more people from Uzbekistan than there was from El Salvador that particular month I was in Yuma, Arizona. Those are folks that have traveled through multiple countries and continents to be able to then pay the cartel to be able to cross the border. That's not an asylum request. That's economic opportunity. So we're open for asylum seekers. We do have a humanitarian nature, and our country has always had a humanitarian nature. But if these are individuals traveling through multiple countries that have not requested asylum anywhere else because they say, well, I've got a cousin that lives here in America and I want to be able to join them, well, great, there's a legal way to be able to do that, but it's not asylum. That's ignoring the basic premise of asylum. So the thing that needs to be done with asylum is have a higher screening standard so that you're not released into the country and awaiting a 10-year process to be able to request asylum. That ignores the legitimate asylum seekers. They don't get their day in court because so many people that are avoiding the process are skipping through the process. But it also puts out a global message that says, hey, if you want to seek asylum, we have great compassion. Go to a nearby country and do that just like we do in the rest of the world. So let me take one more from somebody who hasn't asked a question. Anyone else? Okay, you get a last question then.
Thank you, Senator. Republicans claim the Biden family has no business venture to justify the millions sent from foreign sources. What is your reaction? And then going off women's question about the town hall, what was your reaction to the entire Trump town hall?
So second one I can't answer because I actually met with a whole bunch of constituents last night and didn't see all of it. On the previous one, I'm going to let the House be able to drive that messaging as well. They're the ones doing the investigation, be able to walk through all the data and information. So y'all, thanks for coming out. Thanks for being a part of the dialogue today. Let's get the message out.